Thank you very much, Richard. Can I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to join the chorus of appreciation to Paul McClintock. He is somebody who I had the pleasure to work with in government in a previous capacity. He's always been somebody who's been professional in everything he has done and brought high capacity to the tasks that he has had. So too with Diane. Best of luck. It's a job for life or not. But again, you're someone who is of the highest calibre with a great reputation in corporate Australia, and I wish you all the very best in that role, as well as thanking Melinda, the board members, some new, others leaving, and Richard and Alan's for supporting this event tonight. And I want to thank CEDA for the opportunity tonight, acknowledging their history of contributing to public policy discussions that advance Australia's economic and social development. CEDA continues to lead the way in focusing on long-term solutions to some of our nation's most complex issues. Tonight I will focus on three issues: the state of the domestic economy, the headwinds facing the global economy, and the challenge of an ageing population and how we are responding. With the budget back in balance for the first time in 11 years and on track for a surplus, it's important that we focus not just on the what, but on the why. At $19 billion per annum, the interest bill we pay is more than double what we invest in childcare and a little under what we spend every year on schools, government, independent, Catholic schools and others. Our debt burden represents not just a cost to the budget and therefore every taxpayer, but also an opportunity cost, as it constrains the government's ability to invest in other areas. If we don't remain fiscally disciplined today, the next generation will have to pick up the bill tomorrow. The return to surplus will have been hard-fought. When we came to government, we inherited a budget deficit of $48.5 billion, or 3% of GDP, the second highest in Australia's history, even though 5 years had elapsed since the GFC. Since then, we have steadily improved the bottom line, with real spending growth having halved to 2% per annum, the lowest level of any government in 50 years. While we have benefited from a positive terms of trade, we have been prudent in our budget forecasts. For example, the spot price of our largest export, iron ore, is currently around $70 per tonne, whereas it's in the budget at $55 per tonne. This conservative approach has ensured that our record spending on health, education and disability support is not contingent on high commodity prices. A good illustration of our increased funding for essential services is the NDIS. Our share of funding has increased to $8.5 billion this year and will increase by more than 50% again as the scheme extends from 300,000 people today who are on it to more than 500,000 when it's fully rolled out. In terms of understanding the drivers of our improved budget outcome, the strength of the labour market, with more than 1.4 million new jobs being created since 2013, has been key. Last financial year, more than 300,000 jobs were created, 100,000 more than Treasury had forecast. Unemployment is at 5.3% compared to 5.7% when we came to government, and employment growth remains at 2% compared to the OECD average at 0.9%, and 0.7% is what we inherited. With more people in work, welfare dependency is now at a 30-year low. The stronger budget position has enabled us to cut taxes for more than 10 million income earners and more than 3 million small and medium-sized businesses, while keeping our tax to GDP ratio well below our self-imposed cap of 23.9%. The $158 billion of tax cuts that we legislated after the last election were the largest in a decade. Together with $144 billion of tax cuts that were announced and legislated in last year's budget, we are creating a stronger, simpler and fairer tax system. We are completely abolishing the 37 cents in the dollar tax bracket, which will now see 94% of taxpayers who earn between $45,000 and $200,000 a year pay a marginal rate of tax of no more than 30 cents in the dollar. Treasury has estimated that the Coalition's tax cuts will boost aggregate household disposable income by around $8 billion a year over the next 4 years. The government has also delivered lower taxes for small and medium-sized businesses, and this includes lowering company taxes 5 years earlier than planned and supporting investment by extending the instant asset write-off to $30,000 and expanding it to businesses with a turnover of under $50 million. The stronger budget position has also given us the fiscal flexibility to respond to significant calls on the public purse, like the drought. The Morrison government has committed over $1 billion additional dollars since the election to provide much-needed support to farmers and local communities. I've seen firsthand the devastating impact that the drought is having. Farmers whose families have been on the land for more than a century have said that they've seen nothing like it. And with 95% of New South Wales and more than 2/3 of Queensland affected by drought, the impact on the Australian economy has been quite significant. If we look at the last 2 financial years, the output of Australia's farm sector is now around 14% lower. Lower farm output is weighing on rural exports as well as food manufacturing. In addition to our drought response, we've also said that we will respond with more funding for aged care in light of the findings of the interim report of the Royal Commission. This will build on what is already record funding for the sector, which has increased by more than 50% since 2013-14. In addition to the immediate spending pressures affecting the budget, such as drought and aged care, the economy is also facing significant global economic headwinds. In recent months, the IMF, World Bank and OECD have all downgraded their global growth forecasts. A principal driver of these revisions has been the flow-on effect of the US-China trade dispute. Now, nearly 2 years on, hundreds of billions of dollars of reciprocal tariffs have been placed on each other's goods. The United States is now threatening further tariffs, which, if applied, will see the amount of trade covered by tariffs reach $735 billion US. While this would represent tariffs covering only around 4% of global trade, the impact has been far more profound. In trade wars, there are no winners, there are only losers. And it's not just the protagonists who are affected, it's the bystanders as well. As a result of the uncertainty and the instability caused by the tariff war, confidence has been hit, investment decisions have been deferred, capital inflows have slowed, and the growth in trade volumes has been severely curtailed. Some countries are feeling the impacts more than others. Germany, the United Kingdom, South Korea and Singapore have all experienced negative quarters of economic growth this year. The other significant dynamic at play in the global economy is the extended period of record low interest rates, which has seen central banks in more than 50 countries cut rates this year. Unconventional monetary policy is already underway in Europe and Japan. And remarkably, 1/4 of all government bonds are trading at negative yields. In effect, investors are paying governments to hold their money as they expect interest rates to stay lower for longer, and they look for the stability and the certainty that sovereign bonds offer. Australia is not immune from these global forces. At 0.75%, our cash rate is at a historic low, and the RBA has also moved. In the words of Governor Lowe, we live in an interconnected world, which means that we cannot completely insulate ourselves from the long-lasting shifts in global interest rates. While we navigate our way through these choppy international waters, Australia, like many other countries around the world, is working through longer-term structural economic challenges, in particular that posed by the ageing of the population. In 1950, 5% of the world's population was aged 65 or over. In 2015, it was 8%. By 2050, it will double to 16%. Some experts are predicting that China's population will start to shrink as early as 2027, with the projection that by 2050 there will be more women in China aged over 84 than the number of people in Australia today. In Australia, we may not be ageing as fast as Europe, Japan or China, but we face this trend nonetheless. Since the first intergovernmental report was released in 2002, we have gone from 13%, or 2.5 million people being aged over 65 and over, to 16%, or 4 million people today. Our median age, now 37, has increased by 2 years since then, and life expectancy has gone to 81 for males and 85 for females. With the 6th highest life expectancy in the world, we are seeing an increase of almost 1 year every 4 years. In Australia today, there are 5,400 people who are over the age of 100. This number will increase more than fivefold to over 26,000 in the next 30 years. As more Australians live longer, the number of working-age Australians for every person aged over 65 diminishes. Whereas in 1974-75, the ratio was 7.4 to 1. 40 years later, in 2014-15, it was 4.5 to 1. It's now estimated that over the next 4 decades, it will fall to just 2.7 to 1. As this trend plays out, the impact on the budget will be felt on both the revenue and the spending side. In a report published by the Parliamentary Budget Office earlier this year, it is estimated that the ageing of the population will reduce annual average real growth in revenue by 0.4 percentage points and increase annual average real growth in spending by 0.3 percentage points over the decade. In dollar terms, this equates to an annual cost to the budget of around $36 billion. As the PBO points out, this is more than the projected cost of Medicare in that year. And as our ageing population puts pressure on our health, aged care and pension systems, we need to develop policies that respond effectively to this challenge. It is a great development that people are living longer, but we must be prepared for its implications. Our policies need to leverage the 3 Ps: population, participation and productivity. And when it comes to workforce participation, we are around record highs. And the participation rate for those aged 65 and over has increased from 12.3% to 14.6% over just the last 5 years. The participation rate for this cohort was less than 6% 20 years ago. However, with Australians in work currently undertaking 80% of their training before the age of 21, this will have to change if we want to continue to see more Australians stay engaged in work for longer. It is not about forcing people to stay in the workforce. Let me be clear. It's not about forcing people to stay in the workforce, but rather giving them the opportunity and the choice to pursue lifelong learning and skills training if they so choose. Governments at all levels have a role to play. Federally, we announced a program in last year's budget that was designed to provide career advice and funding support for those aged between 45 and 70 and who were retooling for the workforce. In this year's budget, we announced a National Skills Commission and pilot skills organisations in areas like digital technologies, human services and mining, which is available to support people of all ages. As Ian Yates from the Council of Ageing has rightly pointed out today, employers also have an important role ensuring flexibility in the workplace, which facilitates the continued and valued workforce participation of senior Australians. The Morrison government also recognises the importance of allowing older Australians to earn more from a part-time job without affecting their age pension. It was with this in mind that the pension work bonus was extended to $300 a fortnight in this year's budget. Population factors are also critical in how we meet this ageing challenge. Our migration program has served us well, with the median age of new migrants being 20 to 25, or 10 years younger than that of the broader population. Immigration has helped to soften the economic impacts of the ageing population. The government is ensuring that we understand all the challenges associated with the changing size and structure of the population. Last year, the Prime Minister established a new population portfolio within Treasury with the aim of addressing the challenges while supporting our economic growth. And last month, the government launched a new Centre for Population to work clearly with the states and the territories, academics and think tanks in order to share data, research, ideas and expertise on population. The work of the Centre will provide a crucial evidence base for policies that ensures we have the right services and infrastructure to meet the future needs of our population. The third P, productivity, however, is one area where we need to do better. Like other developed countries, Australia's productivity growth has slowed, but is better than in any of the G7 countries and the OECD average. Australia's 30-year historical average annual rate of labour productivity growth is 1.5%, but our 5-year average annual rate of productivity growth is 0.6%. Productivity is the most important source of income growth over the long run, contributing 3/4 of gross national income growth over the past 30 years. And with productivity tracking at less than half its long-term average, our focus is on deregulation, skills, industrial relations and other microeconomic reforms that improve service delivery. Infrastructure is a key area, with the Prime Minister announcing just yesterday $400 million plus in a package which involves both new money as well as bringing forward spending on 6 projects in South Australia, with announcements in other states to come. Our 10-year, $100 billion infrastructure pipeline will better connect people to jobs, their homes and their communities, and improve access from our farm gates and our factories to domestic and export markets. Finally, when it comes to meeting the challenge of an ageing population, it's vitally important that we get the settings right around retirement incomes. Under our retirement income system, the combination of the age pension, superannuation and voluntary savings work together to secure the living standards of Australians in their retirement. As Australia's superannuation system matures, already with a pool of savings of around $2.8 trillion, future retirees will have higher superannuation balances to support them in retirement. Consequently, the age pension will make up a smaller proportion of future retirement incomes, and a higher proportion of pensioners will be on a part-rate pension rather than the full rate. In the context of this changing dynamic, I recently announced a review of the retirement income system, which will be led by former Treasury official Mike Callaghan and include on the panel Professor Deborah Ralston and leading business figure Caroline Kay. The review will look at the three pillars of the existing retirement income system. This is the first comprehensive review of the system since the establishment of compulsory superannuation 27 years ago, and it follows a recommendation of the Productivity Commission. Through its work, the review will establish a fact base of the current retirement income system that will improve the understanding of its operation and the outcomes it's delivering for all Australians. The panel will release a consultation paper in the weeks to come and will provide a final report to the government by mid-next year. Ladies and gentlemen, as we implement our economic plan to repair the budget, to grow the economy and to guarantee funding on essential services, we do face some significant domestic and global economic headwinds. This will require calm and considered decision-making, and we cannot afford to engage in knee-jerk reactions to every economic event or every request for more government funding. Our ability to effectively manage these short-term challenges, as well as in the longer term, the challenge of an ageing population, will depend on this approach. Thank you very much.